Welcome to Leadership Kung Fu with your hosts, Sandi and Jennifer Long.
So welcome to another episode of Leadership Kung Fu, where we help leaders find the patience, discipline, and agility to navigate leadership challenges with confidence and clarity. I'm Sandi, CEO of Satori Consulting in Toronto. I'm here with my esteemed co-host and author, Jen Long from Own Up in Denver, Colorado. Jen, so great to see you again.
Great to see you, Sandi. Happy February. Maybe we shouldn't say that because maybe this doesn't come out in February.
Right. Happy March.
Happy March. Happy whatever month you're listening to this in.
Yeah, that's right. Great.
Yep.
So it's interesting. So we're not a political podcast by any stretch, but when Jen and I were preparing for this episode, we couldn't ignore the leadership ping pong game that's playing out in the world around us. The constant back and forth is fueling uncertainty and fear and pushing leaders into reactive mode rather than strategic decision making. So with that in mind, today we're going to discuss tips on how leaders can and should be leading less reactively and more strategically, which often means conquering fear and having laser-like focus. So this podcast is called Reactive Fist, Broken Mind, The Cost of Fearful Leadership. As you may know, when we're talking about Kung Fu, where it's always about the practice and the discipline and the mastery, and where a warrior mindset is essential for strategic and fearless leadership. So Jen, why don't you kick us off with some of the triggers outside political, of course, that are putting leaders into reaction mode?
Watching the news, that'd be the first trigger. Yeah. But other than that, some of the triggers that are really putting leaders in a precarious position are things like prioritization overload, cognitive overload, really the reactive trap, the firefighting of having to deal with what's happening and how that's impacting business based on what they perceive are the impacts and the fears that get raised. And the illusion that everything is important, that this all is going to matter immediately, right? Those are some of the ones that I've noticed. What have you got?
Yeah, those are excellent ones. I think the fear factor, so how uncertainty and crises and rapid change, they trigger this knee-jerk reaction to move on something immediately. I think there is the cultural norm. Some organizations just are high stakes, they're urgent response mode all the time by default, which means it's hard for them to step out of being strategic. I think that's a couple other ones that I can think of.
Yeah. And it's dangerous. It's dangerous because when we bring the Kung Fu to the thinking, right? So being reactionary and responding and having to move at speed is always dangerous. If you're not willing to create some of the space and calm to make better decisions. And it's the decision making really that goes at risk in so many ways, because the elevated fear and emotion driven context can create, a lot of the biases and heuristics will start to play into, if you're making these decisions with your team, if you're making these decisions on your own, no one's there to really guard against that, which is why the calm and the presence and the creating the space, even if, create the 72-hour rule, right? Like let's at least take that long to think it through.
That seems like a bit of a luxury, doesn't it? 72 hours. So
72 hours, right?
Yeah, maybe 36 hours might be more. But when you're in a leadership position, how you behave and how you show up to your team, they will mirror it, right? If you show up with calm mind, calm presence, let's be strategic and think through something and make decisions that are sort of looked at multifaceted, so they are the best decisions with the information that we have. Your team will rally around you. If you show up in this short-term reaction, we need to go here, we need to go there, we need to get this done, we need to get that done. They will also do that. And so we really need to be, as leaders, thinking about how we're showing up.
Well, and your workforces they're also subject to all this whole climate thing, right? They're all subject to everyone. is being impacted. They're watching what's happening to the federal workforce in the US, right?
Yeah.
They're like, oh my God, what does this mean about, and and the tactics and strategies are definitely putting people in a place of dis-ease and discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting. I mean, I went to a conference to work with a team of leaders a couple of weeks ago. And I was talking to a guy on the team who is in the HR department, and he shared out that um, the organization had moved, as so many have, to eliminate DEI initiatives. And in doing that, they also changed and actually eliminated core values from the business. And so when you went,
Deliberately?
yeah, by design.
What?
And I'm like, gosh, that seems awfully fast. And he was like, you think? And so it's just an interesting thing. And so as we think about the speed and the reactiveness, like, oh, we don't need to do that, or we're not going to do that. Especially, it's a huge ripple effect, right? So many businesses are affected in one way or another, either because they're somehow tied to a federal contract, or they've got some kind of nonprofit there's just so many. It's an interesting ripple effect in businesses in so many ways, and that isn't to
Yeah.
say that every business, but this whole um train that everyone's on to jump to change their own internal policies, to reevaluate, like, that whole piece of leadership now is very interesting to watch. And when I speak to the leaders, I'm very much about, have you thought it through? What was the conversation around the
Mm-hmm.
decision, right? Um, because the short-termism of the maneuvering is going to create longer-term chaos in the organization.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's one of the issues that they need to pay attention to if you're going to lead now, that your short-term thinking and your short-term maneuvering to quell whatever the fears are. Maybe we should talk a minute about what we perceive, or what are the leadership fears? What really kind of drives reactionary behavior? What is it that leaders are so pent up about?
I'm curious though on that particular one because I sort of, while I at some level understand the EDI piece, given what's happening in the US and the tone at the top, the values piece is an interesting one because they are different unless all of your values were centered around EDI. But
Mm-hmm.
it's a way of hiring, it's a way of rallying, it's a way of creating some unity across your workforce. And
Mm-hmm.
I'd be really curious as to why they made the decision to get rid of
Why they
them.
made the decision to do that? Because in doing that, what's the impact?
Yeah,
Right? Suddenly, employees are like, well, do any of these values stand for anything?
yeah.
Right?
Do we as a
Do
company
we,
stand for anything?
well, is this meaningful anymore? Right?
Yeah,
It brings in fundamental issues into your workforce around what that message is.
yeah.
And I thought, and we had kind of a short conversation about it, just he and I, but I thought, wow, that would be a very interesting conversation to have with the entire team about.
That would be. And I'm just
Yeah.
curious, were they government?
Not government, but do have government contracts.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So political folly, maybe.
Well, and this leads to the fear. What are you afraid of, leader?
Mhm.
Right? You're
Well,
not the government. You're
you
not.
live in the US. Jan, do we need to tell you?
But
No.
but that's the thing, right? This is where,
Yeah,
if you're gonna operate in fear, you shouldn't be leading.
yeah.
You shouldn't be leading at all. And the erosion of trust in the workforce and the erosion of stability. I mean, your role, especially at times right now, your role as a leader is to be a sense maker
Hmm.
and a source of stability.
Yeah,
And when you have knee-jerk reactions around, let's kill this policy, and oh, by the way, that means we're going to have to get rid of this, and don't think through what the implications of that are, I question your strategic capability.
for sure, for sure. Because in this particular case, and I don't know who it is and don't need to know,
Well,
they
I can't
clearly,
out them.
well, no, we can't out it, but no, it's an interesting one because they are in a position, almost a position of power, where they can make these decisions. Where some of these other political organizations are just being wiped out and they don't have a choice, right? They don't. So, but they have power to make decisions that are going to affect long term. And so to not sort of stand in that power and really reflect on how decisions. And so shifting from that survival mode to a vision driven leadership approach where you slow down decision making and we all know that when you slow down decision making, better long-term outcomes come. So
Right.
it's how do you that 36, 72 hours, but in that moment, how do you slow down that decision making and quell the fear that is bubbling and probably very real?
Well, and here's the thing. And like I said, the 72-hour thing is one option, but you can also do a 90-minute 90-minute critical thinking session,
Yes.
right? Time box it. What are the implications of, right? Get enough thinkers in the room, right? To go through what would happen if, how do we do this? What would be, you know what I mean? It doesn't really take that long
No.
to
And
discern for yourself. Yeah.
for sure. And sort of in that, in that box of time is sort of creating a safety zone, a psychological safety zone, if you will, so that people can, share what they're thinking and in a safe environment. So you're not leaving things on the table because fear's getting in the way.
Well, and here's the other piece of the puzzle, right? So, and I don't know what this organization did internally, so I don't have all the
Sure.
data, right? I just know they made the change. And did they? So one of the options to be more strategic instead of reactive is what kind of town hall are you creating to get a sense of where your staff is, to get a sense of where your workforce is, to get a pulse check on what's going on for us, and how are we all being affected by this, and how do you take that data into consideration, right?
Yeah.
There's that whole conversation that needs to happen.
And I think on the flip side, decision being made, how are they communicating to that? And again, you and I are in a vacuum sort of in judgment zone of this particular organization.
Right. Maybe they did all this and they were like, screw it. But I have a hard time imagining that's the case.
Not in such a, we're 31 days in, but they've made this decision that sort of line up with this, right? So not a lot of time to sort of think that. But but it's an interesting thing to sort of think about this short term, they just broke their fist, right? In the dojo, they just broke their fist. And what are the implications? If they haven't thought through them, they could be huge. Could be huge.
Yeah. I mean, it's things like talent drain, right? People who want, and we're looking at a generation of people in the workforce right now, right? That are coming in, that are looking for meaning.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And they're looking to say, does your brand match my brand? Right? There's a whole implication about what it does to your talent pool and how they start to mistrust or resent the decision making. Right? And so that's a huge piece.
Yeah, I think that is a huge piece. I hadn't thought about that whole next gen and what they want, but you're right. They want their brand to match the brand of the organization that they're and they want to know that the organization is doing the right thing, whatever that means.
Yeah.
For the organization, for them, for their colleagues. And so it'd be interesting if we could be a fly on the wall to see how this is what's communicated down.
Well, right. And of all the things to anchor in right now, it's your organizational values.
Yes.
Of all the things that's where you anchor in and go, who are we in this moment?
Yeah.
Because we're going to be faced with making some decisions.
Yeah.
Because there are things, and one of the things that you brought up that I thought was, one of the drivers around this was very much about this fear of losing key stakeholders. Right? What is the especially if you're publicly traded, right?
Yes. Yeah.
If you're big like that, if you're not big like that, anchoring in your values is the easy thing. It's like, yes, we're going to stay who we are. We're going to stay the course. But when you have these larger organizations and they've got stakeholders and investors, that's where I think leaders start to get squeamish.
What they do, it's like the year-end results, the month-end results, and Q quarter end results, right? But this is around people and this is around leadership. And you can't be squeamish. Like you just can't, I don't know.
Well, you can't because, and we're saying squeamish, but what that really means is you're signaling weak leadership.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you kowtow to this kind of cultural phenomenon, when the zeitgeist, is whipping you around, weak leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. And, I wish a whole lot of leaders would be listening to this podcast when we bring it out, because I think a lot of people are going to have to start thinking about what kind of a leader am I going to be in this chaos in which we're working. There's always been chaos, but this time
Always been
it's
chaos.
always been chaos. But this
But
feels
there's
like
more, and it's by intention. I feel
yes,
like the strategy at the top of this country currently is we're just going to pepper you with all kinds of crap and distract you here and distract you there
yes.
and move something here. And in that moment, right, you're all going to be confounded and whatnot. And it's really going to take some staunch leaders, some clear headed leaders to parse this, make sense of it, and create decisions for their organizations that are going to keep them in the business long term.
In the business that they want to be in,
Right.
working with the values that they want to work within, right? So I think that is an important aspect. You can continue to be a business and you can continue to thrive, but you could be at odds with who you are as an organization to appease the political realm of which we're in, right?
Well, just all to appease the fear, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not even just the political thing, right? Because
Mhm.
that's outside the organization. But what are the real fears that the leaders are working in? Because I think that's the thing they've got to sort of get their head around, right? So
Mhm.
things like avoiding controversy and protecting their reputation.
Yeah.
Those are going to be some drivers around are we going to get political backlash, are we going to get all the things, but from me as a leader, I've got to protect reputation, right?
Yeah.
and and avoid the controversy, and I don't want my organization to be dragged into the spotlight for the wrong reason.
Yeah. But the short-term thinking of this is that the I don't think I don't know about them. There's a lot of organizations probably not thinking about what the right reasons are, right? Because right now, if that fear, if you can't see through the fear, if you can't parse it out and think about what is driving that short-term reactionary impact that you're going to make, then you're sort of always in defensive mode and not in offensive mode, right? And we need as organizations to be offensive.
Yeah.
We need to
Yeah,
set
your
back.
decisions are going to be about appeasing,
Mhm.
right, as opposed to standing in solving the issues and addressing the controversies as they roll in your door.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, we often talk about strategy as being, making choices, right? What do we want to do, but what are we not going to do? And in this sort of weird environment that we're all working in, and this fear environment that
Mhm.
many people are working in right now, it would be a really good exercise to sit back and say, like, what will we not give up? What will we not, allow happen? What will we not fill in the dots?
Yeah.
And which will help drive the things that you're willing to do and be less reactive and be much more focused on what means to something as valuable to your organization and not just a flavor of the day. We need to
Right.
do something now.
Well, because the paradox is that when you make fear-based decisions, you're going to bring about the exact thing that
Yes.
you're afraid of.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's something that you need to consider. And some of the other drivers that I was um, looking at to help people start to put a tap on what's going on and how do you put a name on it, because you can name it, you can own it, and then you
Yes.
can actually deal
I've
with
heard
it.
that before.
So we talk about losing stakeholders and the fear of the thing about maintaining power and business viability, right? But then I think there's also the fear of internal conflict and workforce division, right? What's going on within the workforce itself. And in an effort to maintain harmony and avoid disruption, they just want to quell something quickly, right? And so can move too fast and be
Yeah. I
too
mean,
impulsive.
yeah, but the flip side of that is if they're not thinking about that, right? If they're not
Mm-hmm.
thinking about the impact on staff,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that just could be a negative. So they're trying, in your scenario, they're trying to get rid of it quickly so it doesn't disrupt it.
Mm-hmm.
But when
And
they
so they
make
make
those decisions,
Mhm.
it could do the same thing,
It
right?
brings about it makes it all even worse. And so that's
Yeah,
why I say like there's this paradox. If you make these things, I want to create harmony, so we're going to make these sweeping decisions and just be done so we can quell any kind of, and all that does is foment it.
yeah,
Wait, we didn't get to have a conversation. Wait, who are we as a business, right? It just brings
yeah.
up all the issues that you were hoping not to have to talk about.
Right, right. Yeah, there's so much that can go wrong when you're not thinking strategically and you're not in sort of sound, clear mind making
Mm-hmm.
decisions and sort of engaging with others along the way. There's just so much that can go wrong. And we, you've seen it over the years in organizations, like not even now with it, this whole political pressures that are making people ping pong back and forth, but just organizations that have gone from sort of good to great to failure. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of these things is because they started to think about things short term. A good example is Kodak when they weren't thinking long term when they decided that digital photography wasn't for them because they weren't looking at the longer term vision, and so they made some short term tactical changes to their business that led to the demise of their organization.
Yeah. Yeah. They saw themselves as a chemical company
Mm-hmm.
and not as a photography company and stepped away from the patent they already had on a digital
Yes,
camera
ridiculous, ridiculous.
because they didn't want to play in an environment they didn't know,
Yeah,
right? And um it's kind of a perfect scenario around a status quo bias, right?
yeah.
It's a little bit of the ostrich kind of.
And the board, from what I understand at the time, was very much focused on, we're going to stick to our knitting. And, a
Mhm.
strong leadership team in that moment would have said, yeah, but let's really look forward
That's
to this.
short-term
And
thinking. That's
yeah,
safe. That's
yeah,
risk averse. And the conversation of when you're in these kind of pressures, right, is talk about the risks because there's
absolutely.
always risk in strategy. Always. If you've got good strategy, there's always risk.
Yep.
And to just be risk averse and to just distance and just the safe approach and what might be safe could ultimately be so short term that your longer term chaos is going to be massive.
Yeah. 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 No, I think it's a really good example of that short term thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think there's that survival instinct that kicks in for many people. Right? I
Mm-hmm.
want, I want my job longer than the next 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore I'll make decisions that ensure that it has some longevity. But you can't, when you're not thinking long term, you don't know that there is long term at the other end of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so you're in the moment, in the now, that fear. And there's another cost to that you probably
Right.
haven't thought about.
Right. And to just bring it to like another point on the continuum, right? We've got your short-term reactive, then you've got your non-responsive,
Yes.
right?
But ostrich, it's like I like to say.
Right? There's danger in that too. There's danger in lack of strategic clarity. Like when workers are feeling dis-ease about this and you're not in communication, where you're just not talking about it one way or the other, but making decisions and not really having a conversation, right?
Yeah. In a vacuum.
There's that whole strategy as well of let's just quietly and slowly, but that's also detrimental. I mean, you've got to be this whole clear mind is the leadership team has to get strategic clarity
Mm-hmm.
to be effective in this moment, regardless of what level of impact you anticipate, because sadly and unfortunately, it's impacting everybody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not just about business anymore. The social fabric, especially here, is impacted. And this is an opportunity to lead. This is the chance. This is your moment,
Moment to
leaders.
shine.
This is
It,
your
it,
moment.
yeah.
Who are you and what kind of sense making are you doing and what kind of stability are you creating by virtue of what you'll stand in this moment?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
do you stand in your fear or do you stand in your values? And do you open the conversation in a good way?
Yeah. Which allows you as a leader to sort of know when to act and know when to step back, right? So when you're engaging with others, it gives you a bit more clarity and time to react in that. So really thinking about, do I need to act or do I need to step back and conserve some of that mental energy for when you really, really need it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So what are your thoughts in terms of what what can we offer? What can we offer on what's gonna help with the strategic calm? What's gonna help the kung fu get better?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's those disciplines that we've talked about during every episode, which is creating space for that calm,
Mm-hmm.
leading in a calm way, because if you get people rallied up around you in a frenzy sort of way, then they're not doing what you need them to do as well. So how you come across, how as leaders, what you say matters. How you say it matters even more. So how
Mm-hmm.
communication style in which you're using, the tone of which you're communicating things, the
Mm-hmm.
um the take a breath, right? Take a belly breath before you talk so that you're
Right.
you can be a lot more calm, right? There's a
Yeah.
whole
Well,
breath
and the
it's
key is you've got
important.
to acknowledge and you can't avoid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. I think too that one of the things is what are you doing to reaffirm core values, right?
Hmm.
To reiterate, we are who we are. We are who we say we are. And here's what we're doing to recognize and reaffirm who we are. Because I think
Yeah.
that gives people a sense of calm and confidence of, oh, I'm still working for the same company.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure, right? And because let's face it, the employees know that there's stuff going on, and
Mm-hmm.
and so that standing firm in who you are as an organization and in those values, and maybe it's a good time to reflect on the values. Are they the same values that still reflect the organization today? And so maybe some values work around there. But even having huddles within the organization about what do the values mean to your division, into your area, to the greater organization. Starting those conversations allow people to lean in and allow people to really reassess why it is that they're there. And so if you can start sort of that chain of events happening within your organization, it
Yeah.
can create a calmness within your organization that says, yeah, I've made the right decision and I'm here for the long haul.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. What kind of
you
a town
also,
hall do you need or whatever? Yeah.
yeah, you also need to sort of create space for strategic reflection and sort of getting, at your level as a leader, strategic reflection, but also downward, allowing them some time. Right? So maybe
Mm-hmm.
that prioritization overload that's happening within many organizations where everything is necessary and needed and important now or yesterday
Mm-hmm.
is allowing people the time, giving them the license to take time to make better decisions.
Right.
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 I think it's an important aspect.
Yeah. I think those companies who have DEI initiatives who still stand in inclusivity, right? If standing in that moment is going to be an interesting moment, and if DEI is politically lit as a term, right? And I was shocked and appalled to read the list of words that are now banned as put out by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, right? Which
Yep.
I'm sorry, but the word men is not on the list, while women is on the list. Yeah, it's that could be another whole podcast.
But yeah, that could be a whole podcast in itself. I have to read that.
Yeah.
I looked at that, and I'm sure it's that website. I could be wrong, but the U.S. flags changed You only have 9 stars now.
Oh.
Just a little point.
Because that's it, man. The union is over.
Yeah.
No, I feel like the word pluralism is a thing, right? That this whole country is a pluralistic society.
Oh my
and
gosh.
that if you want to go to a safer word that's not on the list, make some efforts around pluralistic initiatives, because that is a little more user friendly, a little less politically lit. Find a way to brand it in a way and stand behind it in a way. And if you're convicted around it, stay there.
Yeah.
Just give it some new language that people can get behind, because that structure is one we live in. Yeah.
Yeah. In Canada, they're not, the DEI thing isn't going away as quickly as it is in the US. But hey, we do a lot of following. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah. But this goes back to, grounding back in your organizational values, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And
because DEI is not just it's not just a thing. And this is what I never really could understand.
I mean, you're gonna put your innovation and your profitability at risk, which is, I mean, don't forget the research around collaboration and inclusivity.
Yeah. And it's about diversity of thought. It's like diversity comes in so many ways, and all we think about is male, female, and gender, and it's not.
It's way more than that.
Yeah,
it's way more than that.
And your experience, and your
and you're
stuff,
hamstringing
everything.
You're hamstringing yourself if you're going to toss it to the side, frankly, right?
Yeah.
Because the research is there.
Mm-hmm.
It's proven people who are more inclusive and diverse in how they roll and how they lead are more profitable.
Yeah.
Are more innovative. Period.
Yeah.
Fact.
I think it's
right. Fact-based communication. We're offering fact-based communication here.
Yeah. But it's just not a thing. Anyway, so many things I'm not understanding about this whole change. But anyway, there is a quote by Stephen Covey that I thought was super cool for what we were talking about, which is, reactive people are often controlled by their environment, and strategic people control their environment. And I think as leaders, we need to think, do we want to control our environment or not? And if so, how do you need to behave? How do you need to show up? How do you need to communicate? How do you need to lead?
Yeah. Yeah. And I do find it interesting because, as you know, I'm on the workforce is the solution, not the problem kick. That when you disdain your workforce, you are going to set your business up to fail.
Yeah.
And to feel, and I think what was surprising in some of the leadership behavior is just the vindictiveness of things.
Yeah.
And the mean-spiritedness that is prevalent. And that is more dangerous.
I think it's more dangerous. And I think when, as organizations or as leaders, notwithstanding where it's coming from, but if you react to that mean-spirited in such a way that you're almost condoning it to happen, you're allowing it and saying it's okay because now I'm going to react to it in such a way that this person or this group want me to.
And leaders are never complicit.
No,
that's what leading is, and that's a choice every leader gets to make.
Yeah.
In terms of how they work through these moments in their organizations and what they bring to bear on where they're clear and how they stabilize in this time. And I think that these are true tests of leaders right now.
Yeah. And so, a good takeaway from this podcast would be for leaders of organizations to get together and talk about this and talk about their organization in this light before they start making more decisions, right? Let's have a common language, a common platform, a common way that we're going to make decisions so that we are unified. Because in more than ever, I think unity is an important aspect across organizations and across
Right.
culture.
Right. And if you're feeling ill-equipped for the ambiguity, and you're feeling ill-equipped for this kind of complexity, and if you're feeling ill-equipped about how do I do 90-minute time boxing on how to make these decisions quickly, this is where your executive coaches can help you. So we'll just plug ourselves here at the end to say that there are tools for these things.
Yes,
and there are ways that
absolutely.
you can work through these things, and you're not alone. And there are plenty of people who are willing to support. And this is, if you feel
Prepared.
ill-equipped
Yeah.
in this moment, get help.
Yeah.
Get a coach, get somebody who can work with you, teach you some tools, help you work through some stuff, and
Be a sounding board. Be your
yes,
sounding board,
get a
right?
thought partner, get somebody to
Yeah.
pace with you. Because you don't have to do this stuff alone. And it's really critical, not only to your well-being as a leader, but to the well-being of your entire organization.
Yeah.
And you've got to show up for it.
Because the tone of the top, we all know, makes a difference.
That's right. And on that note, please leave your comments.
Yes.
Share this podcast with as many people as you think it might be interesting to. We appreciate those of you who consistently download and listen. And we will see you on this same bat channel when we do
let us
another
know
one.
if there's other things that you wanted us to talk about, right? Because we're always looking for new ideas, and our listeners are the best people to feed it to us.
Absolutely. What's on your mind? Let us know. Let's talk about it. All right, Sandy. Well,
Thanks,
have
Jen.
fun over there in Toronto. Keep the planes upright, would you?
We will, and wings on.
All right. Talk to you
Bye.
later.
Thank you so much for listening. You can check out Sandy's website at satoriconsultinginc.ca. That's SATORI consultinginc.ca. And you can check out Jen's website at accountabilityatwork.com. If you like what you hear, let us know by leaving a review on your favorite listening platform. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.